Well, as you may have heard, I invited the Democratic leader and Senator Leahy over to my office this morning, along with Senator Shelby. We had a discussion about a proposal that we offered that I thought was reasonable to both sides to give us an opportunity to, in effect, thread the needle on the border security issue. I've heard back from Senator Schumer that the offer was not acceptable. And so now I'm in consultation with the White House about the way forward, and we'll have more to say about that hopefully a little bit later about what the President is willing to sign. I might say the administration is extremely flexible on this issue, and we're obviously consulted before I sat down with Senator Schumer and Senator Leahy. Secondly, we're on criminal justice. We anticipate finishing that tomorrow. We just had another rather spirited discussion in our lunch about that issue, reminiscent of spirited discussions we've had about it over the last 6 years. But we're now in the final stages of getting to passage on criminal justice.
What's different about the criminal justice reform debate we are having is that we've had a number of successful state-based experiments, including in Texas, with prison reform, which recognizes the reality that people in prison will eventually get out of prison. And if you take low-risk offenders into account and give them access to recidivism-based programming to deal with their drug or alcohol addiction or their education deficit or their skill deficit, that many more of them will leave prison and not be rearrested and returned back to prison in the turnstile of our criminal justice system. That saves money, it saves lives, it reduces the crime rate, and reduces the incarceration rate. That's one of the things that I think people find the most interesting, is this is not just a measure of compassion toward the prisoner. This is basically a public safety measure that will actually make it less likely that people will leave prison and commit additional crimes and hurt public safety, while at the same time saving money and giving people an opportunity for a second chance.
Well, as the leader pointed out, one of the things we need to do to wrap up this Congress and this year is to fund the government, and part of funding the government means providing funding for border security. And if you look at historically, the Democrats in the past, in 2006, the Democrat leader and the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee had voted for a border wall. As recently as 2013, every Senate Democrat voted for 700 miles of wall funding in a bill that included $46 billion for border security, $8 billion specifically for the wall. And I think we all agree that there are lots of people, hardworking, lawful people in this country who come here, who play by the rules, the kind of thing we want to encourage. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to attend a citizenship ceremony in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where 99 people from 33 different countries in the world became American citizens, but they did it the right way. They played by the rules, they followed the laws, the kind of thing we want to encourage. The thing we want to discourage is people coming here illegally. And key to that, obviously, is the issue of a strong border and border security. And so I hope that the Democrats will come around to the position that they have held historically. This ought to be an issue that enjoys bipartisan support. There's no reason why Democrats here in the Senate shouldn't be supportive of making sure that we have a strong border that encourages people to come here legally and discourages people to come here illegally.
This past weekend there was a ruling in Texas about the Affordable Care Act, and the whole thing ruled unconstitutional. As a doctor, people say to me, what does this mean to me personally? And for most people right now, it doesn't mean anything until the courts continue to work this way through the system. But for us in Congress, what it means is that we still have an opportunity to deal with the #1 concern of the whole Obamacare law, which is the cost of care. That is the concern of the majority of the American people when it comes to their health care, is the cost of that care. And I'm going to continue to work for ways to allow people to have the freedom and the flexibility to buy insurance that is affordable for them and appropriate for them and their families. We have done this with the association health plans that allow people to come and work together, and it looks like there's going to be about 4 million people who are going to be able to sign up for those plans. Much more affordable care for them. There are the so-called short-term plans, which actually can be going up to 3 years. Again, much more affordable. For some of these association health plans or short-term plans, the costs can be less than half of what care is under Obamacare in terms of the insurance. Right now, we have a number of the Democrats who seem to be running for president, who have a position which is to get as far away from Obamacare as they can, as they try to go with a single-payer, government-run health care system, and which brings with it the higher taxes and the fewer choices and the longer lines that go with government-run health care programs, as we see in England and in Canada. But I'm willing to work and want to work with more reasonably minded Democrats on working to make sure people can get the care that they need from a doctor that they choose at lower costs.
Well, we're wrapping up what has really been a very productive Congress. The first major rewrite of the tax bill, of the tax law in 31 years, real regulatory reform, an FAA bill that moves into the future, big moves forward on opioids and how to deal with that crisis, as well as healthcare research. A lot to talk about. We come to this end of this end of the year now, having to figure out how to fund the remainder of the government. The very worst thing to do when you're talking about funding the government is a government shutdown. The next worst thing to do is a long-term CR, where you just say, well, we can't decide what to do this year, so we're going to do what we did last year. We could very well see another kind of a CR here. I'd rather not have that, but what I really don't want to do is lose all the work in both the House and the Senate of getting these bills to the floor, having them largely debated in ways they haven't been before, and hopefully whatever happens in the next few days, we build on the work that we've done as we look toward a year that we need to get funded as quickly as we can, and then we need to get started on that work for the next year.
Leader McConnell?
Yeah.
What happened with the proposal last night? That there had been chatter that you were attempting to put a bill together, 7 bills, and that fell apart at the last minute. And what should we read into that at this stage?
Well, there are a lot of different things that have been discussed. Where we are at the moment is, as I said earlier, I think that Senator Shelby and I made what was a reasonable offer that both sides should have been able to accept to solve the border security issue and still pass the remaining 7 bills. I believe that incoming Speaker Pelosi has little latitude to make a deal, and that may be Senator Schumer's view as well. You can ask him, but my impression is that the incoming Speaker feels she doesn't have the latitude to settle this. Now, I must say, if I were in her shoes, I would rather not be dealing with this year's business next year. I would assume her preference would be to roll out the new Democratic agenda by the fresh new Democratic Congress in the early stages. But I think this prevents that. If we end up going with a relatively short-term CR, we will end up, in effect, punting this year's business into next year. I think it's not a very desirable outcome. From anybody's point of view, I would think it'd be the least desirable outcome for the incoming Speaker's point of view.
Leader McConnell, do you plan on moving a judge's package by the end of this week? Do you think you can get consent from Schumer to do that as part of the deal?
Yeah, as is customary at the end of a session or before recess, the Democratic leader and I will be talking about nominations. We have a lot of them stacked up, and we'll be talking about trying to put together some kind of package on both executive branch nominations and judicial nominations. Nancy?
How did you convince the president that a shutdown might not be imminent?
I'm sorry?
How did you convince the president that a shutdown actually isn't?
Well, he can speak for himself, but I think a government shutdown is not a good option. That's my view. The American people don't like it. I don't know how many times you remember my favorite country saying, there's no education, the second kick of a mule. We've been down this path before, and I don't believe we'll go down this path again. Well, I'm discussing with the White House where we go next, and once I get an answer to that, excuse me, once I get an answer to that, I'll talk with Senator Schumer again and see what we can do. I think there's certainly bipartisan support for avoiding a government shutdown, and so we're now trying to figure out the way forward, and I'll get back to you when I know. Yeah.
Just to put a finer point on it, are you convinced that we will not shut down?
Yeah, I am.
The White House says this ball is in your court, that they want to see what the Senate can pass.
Well, we're
and the
discussing.
president will decide whether
Yeah.
to sign it. Do you need to know first what the president's willing to
Look, we're in discussion. As I said, we're in discussion with the White House about the way forward. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. After a shutdown. I got to look back here.
Heads up, guys.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm proud to be joined by members of our leadership team, Senate leaders. Hey, folks. I'm proud to be joined by members of our Senate leadership team, Senators Durbin, Murray, and Stabenow. Now, earlier today, I met with Leader McConnell and top Senate appropriators. Leader McConnell proposed the bipartisan Senate DHS bill, which has $1.6 billion for border security plus a $1 billion slush fund for the president to use for his radical immigration agenda. After the meeting, I spoke to Leader Pelosi, and I called Leader McConnell and told him we would not accept their $1 billion slush fund and that our offers to fund the government remain. Let me be clear. The Republican offer today would not pass either chamber. We Democrats have made two reasonable offers that could earn overwhelming bipartisan support in both the House and Senate. One, pass the 6 bipartisan appropriations bills and a 1-year CR for the Homeland Security bill, or alternatively, a 1-year CR for the remaining 7 appropriations bills. The President said last week he would be proud to shut down the government. We Democrats don't want to shut down the government. And as for the idea of what Sarah Sanders Huckabee said, they could get wall money from NAFTA or some other part of the government, they need congressional approval. They're not getting it for the wall. Plain and simple. Now, where are we? The ball remains in the President's and Republicans' court to accept one of our common sense proposals. Now, on another matter also of great importance to American families, and that is health care, a ruling last Friday from a federal judge in Texas put the future of the federal Affordable Care Act at great risk. Every American should be aware of the fact that if the ruling is upheld, the entire law would come crashing down, causing nothing short of chaos in our health care system and calamity for over 100 million Americans. We don't believe that the ruling should stand or will stand. But the danger it poses is so great, we can't simply hope for the right result. We should do something quickly to allow the Senate to be heard and persuade the courts not to tear down the health care law. And in fact, we have added weight because the judge based part of his decision on legislative intent. So, we must act, and we hope we can act in a bipartisan way. Senator Manchin has a resolution to authorize the Senate Legal Counsel to defend the Affordable Care Act on behalf of the Senate. We intend to force a vote on this resolution as soon as possible. Every Republican who claims to be for protections of pre-existing conditions ought to vote aye on the resolution. It's the quickest and best way to ensure the court case against the Affordable Care Act does not remove the protections so many Americans need. I urge my Republican colleagues not just to talk the talk and say they care about these things, but to walk the walk and join us in our intervention against this awful court decision. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chuck. It's been 6 years since we started this journey on criminal justice reform. We've reached a moment where it is an historic possibility both substantively and politically. We have a bill before us on the floor that will address criminal sentencing for the first time in almost a decade, and a bill which will address the issue of prison reform for the first time in the memory of man and woman. This is an opportunity that we can pass a bill this week before we leave for the Christmas vacation. We have bipartisan support. Senator Grassley and I have brought the bill to the floor along with Senators Lee and Booker. We are anticipating 3 amendments by Senator Cotton. We are prepared to debate and vote on those amendments as quickly as possible. The strongest group in opposition to the Cotton Amendment, the association and organizations representing the victims of crime across America, who have all come out against the Cotton Amendments. What Senator Cotton is attempting to do in his amendments, they find violates the basic trust they had as criminal victims when they were given the rights under law to be informed. Roughly 90% said yes, but 10% said no. Senator Cotton is going to try to violate that legal principle and force information on those criminal victims who have asked not to be informed of what happens to the criminal defendant involved in the perpetration of their crime. We believe we can defeat all 3 amendments and bring this bill to a vote. I hope that we also hold open the possibility of bipartisan amendments before we close this that I think will make it an even better bill. But we have an amazing coalition backing us now. We want to get it done, and the sooner the better.
Senator Murray.
Well, thank you. Well, once again, thanks to very reckless Republican politics on health care, families are again in this country very worried about their coverage. Right in the middle of the holidays and looking ahead to a new year, people with pre-existing conditions are once again wondering whether the protections that they rely on to afford coverage will stay in place. Moms and dads who breathe the sigh of relief that a child's broken bone or a chronic illness wouldn't mean financial ruin are again having to hold their breath. Women who no longer have to pay extra on top of their insurance just to get birth control are wondering whether they'll once again have to pay more for a basic part of their health care. And vulnerable young men and women who are under the age of 26 will lose their coverage on their parents' policy. Let's be clear, if this goes into effect, this latest blatantly partisan legal threat is the whole ballgame when it comes to health care for tens of millions of people in our country. There could not be more at stake. Now, we heard a lot about health care from President Trump and Republicans in Congress heading into this past November. We heard they fought to keep pre-existing condition protections, even that every single Republican in the Senate wanted to keep them in place. They insisted they cared about affordable health care for people they represent. Well, based on the health care sabotage we have seen from this president and his party, I find that hard to believe. But if Senate Republicans want to reverse course and protect families from this latest health care threat that they've created, there's a very simple way they can start. Instead of ignoring the unbelievable harm this ruling would do if it goes into effect, or introducing bills that won't actually protect patients and families, they can join the Democrats' resolution, make it clear that Congress never intended to throw health care into chaos. And the Trump administration can direct the Department of Justice to defend families' health care like it should have long ago. Democrats are waiting and we are watching, but much more importantly, the patients and families that count on us across the country have made it abundantly clear they are tired of reckless, harmful Republican politics on health care. And finally, I just want to say, with just a few days to go before a completely unnecessary Trump shutdown right before the holidays, Republicans really have 2 choices. They can do the right thing, work with us to keep government open and fund our national priorities, or they can stand with President Trump, who has said he would, quote, be proud to shut down the government to try to get American taxpayers to pay for his wasteful wall. This should not be hard. I hope we end this year without a completely unnecessary crisis.
Senator Stabenow.
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate and thank Senator Durbin for pulling together a coalition with Senator Booker and others, a bipartisan group that's going to make a very important step forward with all of us supporting it on criminal justice reform. Secondly, regarding health care, you know, the American people have said over and over again, their health care is personal, not political. That's why they engage in the effort to keep the Affordable Care Act, people from all over the country, and it worked. That's why people now are saying to us, what is going to happen? What are we going to do to make sure that they don't lose their health care? 20 million people plus, over 1 million in Michigan, will lose all of their health care if this court case is upheld. And everyone will be affected, literally. At least half the families in Michigan have someone with a pre-existing condition. Over half the population are women that are affected by whether or not we pay more and discriminated against for being women, or whether our health care will be fully covered. And in so many ways, health care, all of the things in the Affordable Care Act literally affect every American. And that's why we are joining with the leader, with Senator Manchin, in saying the U.S. Senate, along with the U.S. House, and frankly, the White House, needs to do everything possible to stand up for people's right to have health care. Health care is something that is not political, it's personal. And the other thing that we are asking is that we come together to move forward, to fund our government. It's pretty basic. The ability to continue public services and do it in a bipartisan way, and we're ready to do that.
Members from both first caucuses coming out of election seem to think that short-term CR might be the only path here. Is that something you and your caucus are willing to support?
Look, if Leader McConnell puts a short-term CR on the table, it's something we'd very seriously consider.
Leader Schumer.
Some of the early suggestions are that may go through February. Is that?
That's Leader, it's Leader, our choice, our preference is the two proposals we've made. If Republicans can't agree to those and propose a short-term CR, we'd certainly very seriously look at it, for sure. But as to how long it is will be up to Leader McConnell.
Leader Schumer.
The president told you he'd be proud to take the blame for a shutdown. Why do you think he changed his mind?
I think, you know, his basic position was untenable. And we were surprised when he said it in the White House. The American people don't want it, and most of his Republican colleagues don't want it.
Leader Schumer, what about the idea that when you exchange these offers, when we get it right up against the deadline, this is typical? Leader McConnell said, you know, you guys rejected his offer. Isn't this always the kind of the way it has to go at this stage?
We had an offer out on the table for days. Ours is the only offer that I know that could pass both houses.
Are you willing to negotiate and include a package of judges as part of a year-end?
You know, our job right now is to get the government funded without a wall. We have had no discussion about judges, none. Nope, next. Nope. Secretary Mattis doesn't seem it's a good idea, and I sure wouldn't want to take the money away from the troops. Okay, thank you.
Is there any way to salvage this offer from McConnell by tweaking it, by making the fund
A $1 billion slush fund is not what is right, what the American people want, and it couldn't get votes in either house to pass.
Senator Schumer, would you rule out a package of judges at the end of the year?
We have had no discussions on judges. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.